Welcome to the Clean Library Podcast, where content meets conscience. We believe there are millions of you readers out there desperately searching for a better way to find clean content. Each episode, we will introduce you to a new author of clean books, giving you, your family, and your friends clean options.
Hello, my name is Marcus Williams, and I'm here with my co-host Brock Morris, and today we have special guest Amy Martinsen. Now, Amy loves to read. One of her earliest memories is hiding between bales of hay to read just one more chapter instead of doing her chores. When her mother discovered this hiding place, Amy learned to climb trees and became very good at balancing on a branch while holding a book. She also developed extremely strong leg muscles. Now Amy still hides to read, but in much less dangerous places, like her closet and the laundry room, though she longs for the leg muscles of her youth. She also makes it her goal to write stories so engaging people will hide to read them, perhaps even in a tree. Welcome, Amy. We're so glad you're here with us today.
Oh, it's wonderful to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. So before we jump into getting to know you and about your books and your story, we need to go over the two truths and a lie, because today I need to catch up. We've got Steve saying Brock is ahead 7-5. I'm falling behind. So let's read those and we'll see if we can figure them out as we talk to you today. Number 1, my great-grandfather robbed trains in West Texas. All right. Number 2, I've lived on the same block my entire life, 60 years. And number 3, I was an analyst for the CIA. So great-grandfather is a train robber in West Texas, lived on the same block your entire life, and an analyst for the CIA.
These are great. I'm interested to get into this and see what we uncover.
These are some good ones. We haven't had any like this before, so this will be fun. So I was the same way as a kid. I would hide to read books.
Right. Yeah.
Although not between hay bales, it was usually in the bathroom or under the bed or something like that. But how did you take that love of reading and decide you want to be an author?
And I knew you were going to ask that question. And so many other writers, especially writer friends that I have, all knew at a very young age that they wanted to write. And that just wasn't me. I loved school. I loved reading. And those were a refuge for me. Not a very happy childhood. And so I just kind of held on to those. And I loved school, and I just threw myself into getting good grades and reading and hiding. And so I think looking back, I think I just didn't have the confidence to try to write, and that just wasn't my focus. And so school really was my focus, and so I really went after my college degree. Got about so I have an undergrad in English education from ASU, Arizona State University, and then I went on into a master's program for English. And kind of in between all of that, like a lot of moms, I got married. I had children. Uh, Stopped my education for a while, then picked it back up when my kids were all in school. And so continued on. And I really had the goal of going through and getting a PhD teaching at the college level, but staying in that realm of academia. And that was very safe for me. And so I was about 3/4 of the way through my master's degree in English, and I did the academic thing. I wrote all the academic papers. I got good at it. I got the grades. I got stuff published in journals. I did all of that. And looking back now, I see what I was doing, but I think at the time I think I got bored. And so I started breaking the rules of academic writing. And if you're familiar with that world at all, you don't do that. At least 20 years
Right.
ago, you don't do that. And by breaking the rules, I mean putting my own voice on the page. When you're writing an academic paper, like a literary analysis, you're just taking other people's opinions and rearranging them on the page. And depending on your professor, you may get like one or two lines of your voice somewhere on the paper, maybe. And um, but I started putting more of myself in the paper. And so I had a very kind professor take me aside and um, say, what's going on? What are you doing? And and she said, why don't you try some creative writing? And I really had never, I just was so entrenched in that world of academics that I just thought, oh, okay, and knew nothing. And at the same time, my daughter was, there were a lot of really clean romance books kind of coming through the house. Her and her friends were reading them, and so she challenged me. She said, "Mom, write one of these." And so I read one, and I thought, "Okay, I'll do that." So embarrassed to admit how arrogant I was about that. Okay, yeah, I'll do that. And so then I actually sat down and tried to start writing some fiction, and it was terrifying. It was absolutely terrifying. It was just me and the page, just my voice and the page. And but I loved the challenge of it. I loved it. So I started writing my first novel, which I'll tell you right now is awful. I cannot recommend it. It's hideous. It's still up on Amazon. I can't recommend it. But I started writing, and it took me 5 years to write that book. But I would, life happens. We're taking care of elderly parents, doing a lot of service in our church. And so I would set it down for months at a time and then pick it back up and write it. So 5 years. Um, and I finally got it finished and had done enough research to realize, okay, this is how you submit something that you've written. And at the time, there were um, several publishing companies, uh, and these were companies associated with the church I belong to, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. They were publishing companies specific to that religion, and they were not requiring you to submit. Um, you could submit unagented submissions, meaning you don't have to be represented by an agent to submit your work to them in however form they want it. So I would just go and follow their submission guidelines and submit and be rejected and submit and be rejected, back and forth, back and forth. And so, um, but a lot of times they would make suggestions and I would make those changes to the book and resubmit it. And it was kind of at that point where I had set it aside for a while, was taking care of life, and I got a call back from one of the publishing companies, and they said, "Hey, do you still have that manuscript? We want to publish it." And I'm like, "Yes, of course I do." And so I had never worked with an editor. I'd never done anything like this. And it was a baptism by fire. I learned so much from that process, and they were very kind with me.
Yeah.
But I didn't have an MFA. I had a master's in English. So it was all academic. I had never done anything with fiction writing or creative writing. And so I learned so much from that process. So they picked me up, they published that book, they published three others. And at that point, I had discovered that there were other people doing this too. So there's a wonderful organization called American Night Writer Association. And the acronym for that is ANWA. So I'll refer to it as ANWA from now on. But someone told me about it. It's a critique-based group. They have local chapters in your area, and you meet once a month, and you bring something and you get feedback on it. And I was terrified to join, but I did it because I needed to learn more. And um, and I realized that people were publishing this themselves. They were learning the process of, um, they were finding editors, they were formatting it themselves, they were teaching, they were publishing it themselves, and they had control over all of that. And my husband really challenged me to, just go do this on your own. You can do this. And so I did. And I'm grateful for the start with the publishing house and what they taught me. But I have been self-publishing since then, and I haven't looked back. So, and I
Interesting.
love it. I love the process of writing. It's very hard. It's very humbling. Um, but you have to have a group. You have to have a connection of people. You learn so much from that. And um, I think in some of the podcasts you've talked about maybe joining some writing groups, one of you. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. Uh, and don't be afraid of critique-based groups. You can find the right one that have rules and that are nice. So
Right.
because I
Yeah.
just feel like I've learned so much from that. So yeah,
That's awesome.
that was great. So that's kind of how I ended up. My books are all on Amazon. I just keep writing, keep publishing.
Cool. And that's a very different journey from most. I think most of ours have, if they've switched between self-published and indie, they've gone the other way. They've gone
Mm-hmm.
started self and then went indie, and you went the other direction. So much there that I just want to dive into. I'm like writing down all these questions as we go.
Good.
I love at the beginning when you were talking about um, that books were, I don't remember the words you use, your escape, or
The
that just
refuge.
a refuge. Yeah,
Yes.
that
Yes.
exactly, that was the word. And I think there are lots of things you can use for that. What different hobbies, different interests. I love movies as well, but I think there's something about books, especially a
Right.
physical book that you're holding in your hand, that nothing else can replicate.
I agree.
Um,
Yeah.
and and the ability to choose the story that you want to read that might be what you need at that time,
Right.
whether different genre, different characters, or
Mm-hmm.
um, that there's so much out there. And the fact that I'm a big supporter of local libraries. Every time I've moved, which has been a
Oh,
lot,
yeah.
first thing I do when I get an address is I go to the library and get a library card,
Mm-hmm.
no matter where I am. And the ability, especially as a kid, where you don't have the money to go out and buy things, you can't
Right.
control what streaming services your parents, but you can go to the library and pick the book you want.
Right.
You
Yes.
know.
I had in school, I was like, my best friend in school was the librarian because I spent so much time there, and especially in junior high. And that was kind of when I discovered Nancy Drew. Oh my
Hmm.
gosh. Nancy Drew is the best. And Mrs. Buckley, my librarian, I every weekend I check out like 4 or 5 Nancy Drew books, and she would say, but you've already read these. You've already read the. I was like, yes, Miss Buckley, I have already read them, and we're going to read them again this weekend. But she was so kind, and she was constantly finding me books, and I think she knew that I needed to see brave, strong women,
Uh-huh.
independent women, and so she would find books with those characters in them for me. So such a wonderful resource libraries are.
Yeah, and I'll bet you she was so excited that she
Oh, she
had
loved it.
this, yeah, a child that was so
Yes,
into it. Yeah.
yes.
Like I was Hardy Boys, but my problem was I didn't remember. I read so many of them, I didn't remember if I'd read it or not. So
Oh,
I'd
and that's
keep,
fine. That's great.
so I'd reread them and like halfway through, oh wait, this sounds familiar. I think but you know what? Who cares? I'm going
Oh,
to
you're gonna
finish it
keep
anyway.
reading. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
One of the other things you mentioned, Amy, that I thought was fascinating was the break you had to take from sort of your focus on academia and English, and how much of a separation it was to write fiction. Do you feel like your education helped you at any point in that, or did you really have to just completely reinvent the way that you were viewing writing in general, and rely on just learning it all anew? I know you said that was a terrifying sort of
It
brave moment for
was.
you, but
You know, yes and no. I think school taught me discipline, taught me to do things thoroughly, to that I can do hard things, and taught me how, especially academic writing, taught me how to order things in my head, um, and to focus, and just some of those things that are a direct transfer into other areas of our lives. But um, there's a really good book. It's called Wired for Story, and Lisa Cron wrote it. I highly recommend it. And one of her main premises is that just because you have um, read a lot of books and you have the ability to discern what is a good story or not. I mean, we can really tell, like in the first chapter, whether this is going to work for us or not.
right,
That does not mean that you can then pump out a good story. And it is two different parts of your mind that you use when you read and take in a story, and then when you go to write it. And so it does not, it's so unfair because we've been feeding this story machine in our head all these years. You think it should just automatically pump out a good story, but it doesn't. You have to learn the craft. And I proved that out. I proved that out. But all of the basic tools of learning and discipline very much helped me in this process. But in some of it, it was really ground zero
very different.
starting.
Well, and that's the first time I've heard that analogy, and it just dawned on me as you said that even within our minds, it's like different muscles you work, right? Just like when you
Right?
exercise.
Yes.
So writing academically is one muscle, reading is another muscle, and they might help each
Right.
other, but writing from a fiction standpoint and creative standpoint is really another muscle that
Oh,
we would
yes.
have to work and exercise in order to put a good story together and write
Absolutely.
down. That's awesome.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
So with your when I guess your daughter, her challenge to write that first book, um, was that the genre that you wanted to write in, or is that just because she said write something like this, or how did you get into your current genre?
Um, I think, well, um, that's a good question. I I think I just started writing, um, generally went to romantic suspense because I love reading it so much.
Hmm.
I am a Nancy Drew follower, right? And and so I went to that. That was the type of book that she gave me to read. Um, but I think too, looking back, I think that the superpower that we wish we had as a child really drives choices later in life. And I wanted to be invisible. I wanted to be invisible for a lot of reasons. Um, but when I found this genre of um, spies and espionage and um, people that had these tremendous skills at being invisible, I just loved it. I loved it. But a lot of it was because that's what I wanted to be when I was younger. And so I think that was kind of all connected. But I did land in romantic suspense, and I do write small town romantic comedy. And
Hmm.
so those are the two genres that I write in.
So was there ever any thought when you went to school to major in something that would lead to a career in espionage or government service, like international relations or something like that?
Nice try. Really nice try on that. That was really good. I'm not
Okay.
going
It
to
was a
answer
lot more
that
subtle than
question.
mine normally are.
Marcus,
So
I'm
I
not
have to give
I'm
you
not
points for
answering
that.
that, Marcus. I'm
And I,
sorry.
and I like, I mean, I want to know, but
Maybe,
okay, that's
maybe
fair.
not.
That's fair. That is fair. So, and you mentioned just along those same lines that the books your daughter was reading were clean
Yes.
romance.
Hmm.
So, was there an impetus there for you to keep your books clean, or why did you make that decision?
You know, that really never was a question for me. The choice to write clean, strongly guided by my faith and my religion, but also um, I had done enough reading to know that um, there is there is something to a story that elevates our mind. And um, I think that one of you mentioned the quote by Louis L'Amour about how his choice of not using obscenity and sex in his books. And I found that quote. And so I want to read it because I love it.
Sure,
And it
yeah.
really has guided my writing. Um, he says, I've written all of these stories without pornography, without any obscenity. I grew up among sailors and miners and lumberjacks and the roughest kind of men in the world, but I never found it necessary to use all that in stories. I can make them real without that. I think much of that kind of writing is a cover up for lack of real skill. And I believe that, but it takes some skill to be able to make your characters become real without um, without going to swearing, without going to sex and vulgarity. Um, I think, and I think that when people, particularly with sex, I think that when people hear the word clean romance, they think it's an oxymoron. They think it's impossible, and that's sad. That's sad that the factory setting for romance for them would include all of, having sex every third chapter or filling it with vulgarities or whatever when it's not necessary. um, because we Okay, so for an example,
Hmm.
there's a reason that we are all still thinking about Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy, or Emma and Mr. Knightley, or Anne and Captain Whitworth. So, anyone not familiar with those names, they are the main characters of Jane Austen's novels written over 200 years ago that are still being reinvented today. And I feel like the reason for that is because the relationship those characters have, are based on two very important things: respect and genuine affection. Now, that's the kind of relationship we all want. We all long for that. In our lonely hour, we all want that kind of relationship and we're drawn to it, whether we will admit it or not. And we keep coming back to it for a reason. So I want to write stories that have that have characters that have those qualities, because that's foundational. And it elevates us. It's not degrading. And we feel that. It leaves a mark when we read something that's degrading and cheap. Um, I know that you've asked some of the other people on the podcast, like, well, how do you work around that? How did Louis L'Amour do
Right.
that? How did he
Right.
make him real? Um, and I think that, so I wrote a few things down on it.
Yeah.
Um, I I think that uh, if you leave some things to the reader's imagination, they will do a much better job at it than you.
Hmm.
And if you do that, you can focus on the feelings of the character. Like, for example, if you have a young boy and he's walking down the hallway of his junior high school, and you could say he's making his way down this hallway and he's being pummeled with crude sexual innuendos. By the time he gets to the end of the hallway, he flies out the door. I don't need to know what those innuendos are. I'm focusing on how he feels busting out of that hallway and out of that door. That's what I carry with me. And if I were to read all of those innuendos, I would be so shell shocked by them. I would lose my focus on that character and my feeling. At least that's my
Mm.
opinion.
Yeah.
Um, he let go a stream of swearing that would make a sailor blush. Kind of cliche, but
Right.
sorry, Mark. Is it Marcus who's the NCIS guy?
Yeah.
Who's the
That was me.
Yep.
NCIS?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
No, you're
Anyway,
fine.
um, we always go to sailors and they're swearing. I don't know
Yep.
why,
All
but
right.
you could do that. You don't need to hear what they're saying. You know what they're doing, and you can then focus on the character itself. And like with romance, um, he kissed me like I'd never been kissed before. Leave it at that, and
Yeah.
let the reader imagine that. Then you have that reader engagement with the story, and we remember that. We come back to that, you know. All those times that uh, Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy had little encounters, that we remember that because we're focusing on them and their characters and not something else. So
Yeah.
that is I offer that as a solution to what Louis L'Amour did so brilliantly, so well.
Yeah.
So
I love that because he's one of my all-time favorites that I found in, well, I was introduced to Louis L'Amour in the 6th grade. So I wouldn't have been able to, when my parents wouldn't have let me, they wouldn't have been in
all
my
right,
house,
yeah,
had he not been clean. And um, I was the kid in school with Westerns that none of the other kids were interested in, but
right,
I just loved. And I think I've read, and he has a massive, massive library. And I think I've read
mm-hmm.
all of them at least twice.
Mm-hmm.
But I love that quote. And I was thinking, while you were talking about letting the reader engage, like kiss me like I've never been kissed before.
Mm-hmm.
If books are a refuge and the thing that we need at the moment that a person needs, then that interpretation is really important for them to be able to make it their own or interpret it or really um, connect with the characters in their own way instead of being told how to
Right,
connect.
right, yes, I
Because
Yeah,
agree totally.
I had the same realization as, we've mentioned several times that, Amy, I know you mentioned maybe not the happiest childhood and it being a refuge and escaping from it. And it dawned on me too that oftentimes that refuge or that place to go is because maybe the lives of those reading, and especially children, want to escape. And I don't mean to imply anything here with you, Amy, but to escape life where maybe it's full of those things that
Right,
they want to get away from, right? And so
right,
many, and yes, as kids, but then also as adults, as a refuge away from, it's not to keep people's or kids' innocence necessarily, but to provide an environment that isn't as harsh as the real
right,
world and what they're experiencing on a regular basis. And like you said, Marcus, and then they can input their own life experiences into it
right.
without being told what exactly it was.
Hmm. Right, exactly. If you have that brave protagonist and you feel like you've engaged with them, then that raises your confidence. That
Mhm.
raises how you see yourself and your own capabilities, and that you too can do hard things, and you're going to go try them because you feel like you have a friend in this character,
Right.
and that is just such a huge thing for young people. Really huge thing.
And well, going back to the Hardy Boys or Nancy Drew, like they were high school kids. And if you think about a lot of kids today, if you showed them the things that they were doing in these books, they just can do, let's go out and do this together. We'll support each other and do it. That would almost be a foreign concept to a lot of kids who feel um, anxiety or this lack of confidence in being able to accomplish something that I probably learned a lot from those books and didn't even realize it, that I was taking that in and building my own
Hmm.
confidence that way.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And I think, if you look at just the market in general and media and entertainment, it feels like there's been a bit of a backlash against, um, whether they be movies or TV or books or whatever, that are telling you what to think or what you should believe, no matter which way that goes. If I feel like those types of stories are not being accepted because people don't want to be told what to think. They want to make up their own minds after they watch a story. Like, what was the moral of the story for me, instead of telling me what it was?
Right, right. Oh, I agree completely. And um, it's really interesting to try to market a clean romance. It really is interesting because of that very point that you brought up. We are being told what our factory setting should be for fiction, for nonfiction, for everything. And and you can't think beyond this. This is what you're supposed to think. And that's it. I think that there was a comment on a previous thing you said something about someone making a comment that you were censoring,
Right,
you
right.
know. No, well, no, we're giving a choice. We're giving a choice outside of this factory setting that everyone says we're supposed to have. And and isn't that kind of what America was founded on? Is choice. We can choose how we want to worship. We can choose to make our own way. It doesn't depend on how we were born, what status we were born in. And so, um, it's okay to write clean. It's okay to read that, but it is a challenge to market it. It really is. All of my books are on Amazon right now. I have a long-term goal of selling direct. I really want to do that. I'll always keep books in Amazon, but I don't want to have all my eggs in that basket eventually.
Hmm.
Um, and I have my books in Kindle Unlimited, and so, but eventually I want to have it in other places. But for now, that's where I'm at. And but you try to market you try to market a clean romance, and they're categories, Amazon categories. If you're familiar with working in those at all, um, I took a course. Brian Cohen
Hmm.
taught a great course on Amazon ads, um, author ad school, and he teaches you how to maneuver through these categories. Now, I call them the delicate and ever-changing categories on
Yes.
Amazon. But you go into a category, say, for example, small town comedy. Now, what does that first bring into mind? You go into the category, you're in the Kindle store, and you go to small town romantic comedy. It does imply a little bit of wholesomeness, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
No, no. Oh, no, no, no. You click on that, the top 100 in that category, you are swimming in a sea of bare-chested men. I mean, not one man in that town has a shirt. And
You don't wear
it's
shirts in small towns.
no
Didn't you know
shirts, no
that?
shirts in small towns. None. And and so wow, if I go to the romantic suspense category on Amazon to promote my romantic suspense series, it doesn't fit in. It doesn't. No, it is like the most promiscuous covers you've ever seen, and so I have also my books listed under Christian, and because my characters, my books are not LDS specific. The first one is, but the rest I have just made faith based, which means my characters believe in God, they pray, they have moral standards that they live by,
Hmm.
and so I can put them in the Christian category on Amazon, but a lot of times that's just kind of this meshing of different genres. Amazon finally did listen to us several years ago and created a category called Clean and Wholesome. And it's in the Kindle store under romance. But again, that is just a meshing of all those subgenres, historical, Western, um, uh, everything you can imagine. And so again, it's not a great marketing tactic.
Right.
So, in the whole marketing set, it is a challenge to do, to put clean stuff out there.
Right. And the, Brock and I had this conversation when we were meeting last week, the categories in Amazon and how they create boxes that don't fit. And it's can be really difficult. You end up marketing your book in the category where you want people to find it rather than what it really is.
Right.
That whole idea of categories and genres is designed to help you find books, but there's so many books now that it's actually hurting. It's keeping you from finding them. And
Exactly.
like a great example is that category, clean and wholesome. Those are different things in my
Right.
mind. Related, certainly,
Mhm.
but you can have one without the other. And what if it's a clean book that's not under romance yet? This is a subcategory of romance, and so it just I don't know that that system is working anymore. That it
I I really question it. I think it works well for other genres that
Mhm.
I don't write in. I think
Of
it
course,
works. I think it works masterfully well for other genres, but if you are a clean author, you have to learn how to maneuver around in those categories. Another person that's really helped, Dave Chesum, Kindlepreneur.
yeah,
He's a great resource to learn how to maneuver through those categories and to study and to keep up on when they are delicate and ever changing. Um, but they don't cater to the clean author. They don't, and even Christian, like Christian romance, Christian suspense. Now they're having these subgenres of gritty Christian or edgy Christian. What does that mean?
right.
Right.
what,
Wait, what?
well, that opens the door for a lot of stuff.
Right.
And
That
and I think
that
that's
may
part
be
of
that's not a good thing. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
yeah, no, and I think that's part of the issue is what we're limited to is thinking in these terms of genres, right? We don't have the ability to search outside of that or really try to pull in a lot of different elements of what a book might be, and because they vary so much, so we have to create these genres and subgenres that still don't necessarily fit, and Amazon's certainly not giving us the functionality to to sift through to find what we're looking for, or to your point, for authors to market what they're writing for, when it just doesn't quite fit. That's something we've discussed a lot. So there's definitely a gap out there for these books to fall into.
Another
Yeah.
thing that's been really misleading, is the popularity of the different type of cover that is popular now. It's called vector or illustrated covers,
Yep.
and they look like just a drawing, like a Hallmark type drawing of like a man and a woman, and have a little dog or a Christmas tree or something. So it looks very innocent, very Hallmark like. Um, you go into the romance section of Barnes and Noble now, and it is not the romance section it was 10 years ago at
Hmm.
all. Tons of these beautiful illustrated covers, and they're on books that probably are at least rated R, if not beyond.
Right.
And so, very misleading, very difficult, and Amazon, of course, makes that very difficult too. It's a very popular form of cover, but it doesn't show necessarily what the book is. It it implies something completely different.
Yeah. I agree. Recently, I agreed to be an ARC reader for an author, do a review, and based on the cover and based on the category and the description, it was a cozy mystery with some sweet romance, is what I was thinking. And nope, it was not.
It
It
wasn't
was
that, was it?
no, not at all. And that was my review. It's like if this is what you want, the story was fine, right? It was a good story. It was well written,
Mhm.
but it was a bait and switch on the the category and the cover, because this is not what I was buying when I
Right.
agreed, and there's got to be a better way to let consumers know what they're getting other than cover and blurb. It just
Right.
it's not accurate enough.
Right. And, I think one of your questions that you put out for us was, would it help to have a rating system for books? Yes, it would, until, like everything else, the rating system gets played and it doesn't work anymore.
Yeah,
Just like movies. I mean, you go to a PG movie. Well, PG movie now was an R-rated movie when I was growing up.
right.
And I'm old enough to remember that. And so, it will work until it doesn't, until it gets gamed.
Yeah,
And so
that's
I
a
think you
great
just have
point.
to keep retrying. And I think too, as a clean author, you have to just develop your craft better and better and tell a better story. It's all about stories, the power of story. And if you have a good story, it will rise to the top. It will spread word of mouth, if nothing else. And people, we want a good story. We will do anything for a good story. And so we just have to keep making our stories better and better and better.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And it's that first hurdle, though. It's that getting those
Mm-hmm.
first few people to read it who will then start talking about it or recommending it. And that's the hard
I
part. That's the hardest part.
Right, I agree. And I had, some of the best advice given to me when I started self-publishing, and that was to create a newsletter.
Hmm.
And it was really frightening too. I thought, what, how to go, but if you look at, um, if you look at it like I'm going to provide these people who are looking for clean authors and clean books a source to find them, I'm doing them a service. They can subscribe, they can unsubscribe, whatever they want to do, but I'm offering this service. And so I started doing a newsletter. I have a newsletter. I have almost 2,000 subscribers. I send it every other week, and I am a source of. I do cross promotions with other authors. They're called newsletter swaps, and so I'm always promoting 3 or 4 other clean authors and their books. Like your podcast, I will put a permalink in my newsletter. So every newsletter goes out has a link for this podcast.
Awesome.
And
Thank
just
you.
so that they have a sort of course. And so there's a source of doing that. And an important thing with that newsletter I have learned is that it is a direct connection to your readers. You are not putting social media between you and your readers, not Facebook, not Instagram, not TikTok. Those can go down. And what do you have? But you have your email address for your readers. You have a
Hmm.
relationship with them. I have Michelle Reinhardt. Hi, Michelle, in Ohio. She is a faithful newsletter follower. Um, Begged me to write a third obituary book. That's how book 3 came about. Because she would write me every week and say, "You have to write this book." She's a dear friend. I love her. Other people I have developed too. That is the kind of relationship you want with your readers because they have friends and they spread the word. That is that direct connection. And I think newsletters are absolutely foundational for an author, especially a clean author who's pushing that wheelbarrow up a hill,
Yeah.
of marketing their books. So, absolutely.
Yeah, that's great advice. Um, so we're getting we're getting to where we need to wrap up here, but we wanted to know, do you have any recommendations for our listeners, for other clean authors that you would?
I do. I
All
have
right.
more. I'll be
Okay,
quick.
great.
Okay. The first one, Amy Standage. She writes as LL Standage. She has a fantastic urban fantasy series, Fathom, mermaids, suspense, romance. She just came out with a new YA book, Call Me Hinbing. Awesome books, awesome person. The second one, Jennifer Griffith. In the indie author world, we call her the Queen of Christmas. She has a gazillion Christmas novels, lovely novels, but she surprised us a year or so ago and came out with a romantic suspense. If Looks Could Kill. I read an arc of that, an advanced reader copy. Fantastic, so good. The third one, Paige Edwards, a lovely person, uh, writes romantic suspense, so good. I read an arc of her latest, Flat Deception. I couldn't put it down. It was so good. The last one, Mindy Strunk. Mindy Burbridge Strunk. She writes beautiful Regency romance, contemporary romance. She's the one who took me aside and taught me how to publish, my self-publish. Took the time to do that. I'm forever grateful. So I know all four of these women. I'm dear friends with them. I recommend everything they've written.
Awesome. Thank you. That's great. This is one of the best parts. We're building this list of authors for people to find the authors, to find the books that they want to read.
I'm going to
And
make these women be on this podcast. I'm
okay,
going to
do
make
it.
it happen. Oh,
Do it. We'd
yeah.
love to talk to them.
We're going to do
That
it.
would be great. Okay. All right. We need to get into the two truths and a lie. So let's remind everyone. Number one, my great-grandfather robbed trains in West Texas. Number two, I've lived on the same block my entire life, 60 years. And number three, I was an analyst for the CIA. All right, Brock, what do you think?
All right. So I'm gonna go against maybe what logic would tell me, and I'm going back to one of the first things you said when we started this was that your goal was to stump us completely. And so I'm going to say, despite the fact that your books have a heavy espionage type, potentially CIA take on them, I'm going to say that you being a CIA analyst is the lie. Just because I think you're trying to throw us off, but I'll leave it there. Marcus, what's your thought?
Okay. So I looked at him and said, which one is the one I would discount and say was the most probably true? And I'm going to go with that one as the lie instead. So kind of your strategy, but I'm going to go with number one, great grandfather robbed trains, as the lie, because that's when I very first off thought was true. So.
Okay. Okay. Well, the first one, my grandfather, Thomas Jefferson Johnson, he lived in West Texas. He did belong to a gang that robbed trains and railroad wagons, you know.
All right.
And so that is true. And the really funny thing is my neighbor just through the field, his great uncle was a Texas Ranger in the same area during the same time. And but clearly not a good one because he never caught my
Because he never caught your.
So yeah, my grandfather lived to be an old man in West Texas, kind of a character.
Sounds like there's a co-authored book there to have with him. Yeah.
Oh, he has a story. That's for sure.
I bet.
That's cool.
So that is true.
Okay.
The second one, that I've lived on the same block my entire life, that is true. So Brock, you have won.
Dang it.
I haven't lived on the same block. You're ahead, buddy.
I'll take it.
I've lived on the same block my entire life. And that really helped kind of form the premise for the obituary writer books about just people, I would know these people my whole life, and then one of them would pass away and I'd go to the funeral and I think, are we talking about the same person? That's not who I knew. I don't remember being like that. And so I just kind of started that thinking, but no, in my dreams, I would be a CIA analyst. And that was kind of an obvious one, but I thought I'd give it a go since I write spy books. But no, in my dreams, I would do that. Yeah.
Okay. So my first instinct that it was true was right. So the gamble did not pay off.
It did not pay off this time.
So you've taken a commanding lead. It's 8-5. It's all right.
There you go. There you go.
It's gonna be rough.
We have plenty of episodes in the future for me. Maybe I need to start guessing first instead.
Right.
Maybe
we can do that. We can. Hey, I'm equally brilliant, Marcus.
You're confident enough.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely.
If I could just take a second. I have one more
Yeah,
Louis
please.
Labor quote I want to offer you
Okay.
is just as a thank you for what you do. Okay.
Yeah.
He said, knowledge is like money. To be of value, it must circulate. And in circulating it can increase in quantity and hopefully in value. What you guys are doing, you're helping add value to what we clean authors do. And so thank you. Thank you so much for this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's an amazing ending to the episode today. A great quote, and we really appreciate that. Thank you so much for being on the podcast, for all of the discussion, the conversation, your insight. It's been I just love these. Like it's always, I look forward to the hour, and this was no exception. So thank you so much. And for everyone out there listening, please follow, subscribe, share it with your friends. Word of mouth is one of the best ways that we can share this podcast and all these amazing authors with the world. So please do that, and we will catch you next time on the Clean Library Podcast.